Oliver Grant, a wealthy real estate mogul, appears to have a perfect life with his glamorous wife, Emma, until he uncovers shocking evidence of her infidelity and a chilling conspiracy to betray him. As secrets unravel, Oliver discovers layers of deception involving hidden accounts, dangerous accomplices, and deadly intentions. With his fortune and life at stake, he must navigate lies, manipulation, and betrayal to uncover the truth. Packed with twists and emotional turmoil, this gripping story exposes the devastating impact of trust shattered by infidelity, leaving viewers outraged and desperate to see justice served. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. We're so glad you're here. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's get into today's story. Oliver Grant was the kind of man who turned heads without even trying. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. A real estate developer with a string of luxury condos under his belt, Oliver's life looked perfect, at least from the outside. He had the dream house, the expensive cars, and a wife who could have stepped out of a magazine cover. That wife, Emma Grant, former model, social media influencer, and the kind of woman who made strangers stop scrolling. Her Instagram feed was a curated masterpiece: candlelit dinners, tropical vacations, and perfectly filtered selfies of their picture-perfect marriage. But behind the filters and hashtags, something darker lingered. Oliver and Emma had been married for 10 years. They met at a charity gala when Emma was just starting her modeling career. She was beautiful, charming, and, most importantly, she made Oliver feel alive. But lately, that spark had started to dim, and Oliver noticed. It started with the little things: Emma's sudden obsession with privacy, the hushed phone calls she always took in another room, and the way her laughter felt just a little too forced when they were alone. Then there were the late nights. Emma claimed it was work, meetings with sponsors, photo shoots running late. But Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, that feeling became impossible to ignore. It was a Friday evening, and Oliver had wrapped up work early to surprise Emma with dinner reservations at their favorite Italian restaurant. When he walked into the house, he expected to find her getting ready, maybe scrolling through her phone or trying on outfits. Instead, the house was eerily quiet. Her car was gone. Oliver checked his phone. No texts, no calls. He frowned, dialing her number, straight to voicemail. And that's when he noticed it, the faint smell of cologne that wasn't his. It hit him like a slap. Oliver wasn't the paranoid type he'd always trusted Emma, but suddenly, every excuse, every missed call, every late night replayed in his mind like puzzle pieces snapping into place. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was starting to pile up. By the time Emma walked through the door, 3 hours later, and reeking of expensive perfume, Oliver was ready. "Where were you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm, even though his heart was pounding. Emma hesitated, just for a second, but it was long enough for Oliver to catch it. "I told you, I had a shoot. The photographer wanted some sunset shots, and it ran late." Oliver studied her, searching for cracks in her story. Her makeup was flawless, her hair still perfectly styled. She looked more like someone coming home from a date than a long day at work. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" Emma shrugged, setting her purse down. Dead battery. It was a lie, he could feel it, but he let it slide. For now. Because Oliver wasn't just a businessman, he was a planner, and if Emma was hiding something, he was going to find out. Over the next few days, Oliver started paying closer attention. He checked their bank statements, looked through their shared calendar, and even double-checked the GPS history on her car. What he found made his stomach drop. Emma had been visiting a boutique hotel on the other side of town, 3 times in the last month, always during the day, always for a few hours at a time. Oliver didn't confront her right away. Instead, he hired a private investigator. And that's when the truth started to unravel. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Lauren, called Oliver 3 days later with her findings. "Mr. Grant," she said, her voice steady but cautious, "I have something you need to see." She sent over photos. Emma in the hotel lobby, her arms wrapped around a man Oliver didn't recognize. He was younger, with designer sunglasses and a casual arrogance that made Oliver's blood boil. But it wasn't just the photos. Lauren also uncovered text messages, hundreds of them, between Emma and her mystery man. The messages were explicit, heartbreaking, and worst of all, they started months ago. Oliver felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. He couldn't understand it. After everything he'd given Emma, the life, the love, the security, how could she betray him like this? But then he saw something that changed everything. One of the messages mentioned the plan. Oliver's chest tightened as he read the words over and over again. Once it's done, we'll have everything we need. It wasn't just an affair. It was something bigger, something darker, and Oliver wasn't about to let them get away with it. Oliver couldn't sleep that night. The text message kept replaying in his head. Once it's done, we'll have everything we need. What did that mean? Everything they needed. What exactly were they planning? The next morning, he poured himself a cup of coffee and stared out at the city skyline. It wasn't just the betrayal eating at him now. It was the uncertainty, the not knowing. Lauren had already scheduled another meeting. She promised to dig deeper into the man Emma was meeting, but Oliver needed answers now. So, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Oliver had always trusted Emma's phone, but now it felt like a treasure chest of secrets. While she was in the shower, he grabbed it, password protected, of course. But Emma wasn't as clever as she thought. Her passcode was their anniversary date. He scrolled quickly, heart pounding. At first there was nothing unusual, texts with friends, a few emails about sponsorships. But then, buried under a generic contact labeled BS, he found it. Dozens of messages, photos, videos. The man's name was Brian Younger, flashier, and clearly full of himself. Most of the texts were flirty, talks about missing each other, secret meetings. But then Oliver found something that stopped him cold. A voice memo. He hit play, and Brian's voice filled the room. I'm just saying, once the paperwork is signed, it's ours. He won't even see it coming. Paperwork. Oliver's mind raced. Was Emma trying to take his money, his properties, his company? Emma stepped out of the bathroom, hair wrapped in a towel. What are you doing with my phone? Oliver didn't even flinch. And who the hell is Brian? Her face fell, just for a second, but it was enough. Give me that. She lunged for the phone, but Oliver pulled it away. You lied to me over and over again, and now I find this. What exactly is ours, Emma? My business, my house. What are you planning? Emma's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but Oliver wasn't letting her off that easy. Answer me. Her voice dropped, trembling. It's not what you think. Then what is it? She took a shaky breath, suddenly switching gears. The tears started flowing, and Oliver almost believed them. I was scared, Oliver. You've been so distant, so focused on work. Brian made me feel wanted, but it wasn't serious. I swear. Oliver narrowed his eyes. She was good. Too good, but not good enough this time. He held up the phone. You're lying again. This isn't just some fling, Emma. You're scheming behind my back, and you're going to tell me everything now. She didn't. Instead, Emma ran out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Oliver didn't chase her. Instead, he grabbed his phone and called Lauren. We need to talk now. An hour later, Lauren sat across from him, flipping through files. Brian Stevens, she said, pointing to a headshot. 32, works in finance. He's more of a scam artist. Really got caught embezzling from his last job, but cut a deal to avoid jail time. He's been bouncing from one rich woman to another ever since. Oliver clenched his jaw. And now he's after me. Lauren nodded. Looks that way. Emma's name is tied to a shell company he set up last year. And here's the kicker. She filed papers last month to transfer partial ownership of your properties to that company. Oliver's blood boiled. They're trying to steal everything. It's more than that, Lauren said, sliding another document across the table. Emma also updated her life insurance policy. Guess who the sole beneficiary is? Brian. The pieces fell into place. The late nights, the secrecy, The lies. Emma wasn't just cheating, she was planning to leave him bankrupt, or worse. Call the police, Oliver said. Freeze everything. Already done, Lauren replied. But Oliver, there's something else. What? She hesitated. They're watching you. I've seen Brian parked outside your office. Emma's been visiting a security firm. I think they're planning more than just theft. Oliver's stomach dropped. Do you think they're planning to? It's possible, Lauren said. You need to be careful. For the first time in his life, Oliver felt truly unsafe. He'd built his empire from the ground up. He'd faced ruthless competitors, legal battles, and economic crashes. But nothing prepared him for this. His own wife plotting against him. Over the next few days, Oliver played the role of the clueless husband. He kissed Emma goodbye in the mornings and sent her sweet texts at night. But behind the scenes, he was preparing for war. Lauren had hired private security, and Oliver changed every lock in the house. He moved key assets into trusts Emma couldn't touch and pulled strings to put Brian under investigation. And then, he did something he never thought he'd do. He followed Emma. It was late afternoon when he trailed her to a quiet suburban neighborhood. She parked 2 blocks away and walked to a small house with closed blinds. Brian answered the door. Oliver watched as Emma kissed him, longer than any kiss she'd given Oliver in months. But what he saw next made his blood turn cold. Brian handed her a black folder. Emma flipped through it, nodding. She wasn't just in on the plan, she was leading it. Oliver didn't wait. He snapped photos, sent them to Lauren, and called his lawyer. They're going down, he said, voice steady despite the rage burning inside him. But just when Oliver thought he had the upper hand, Emma did something unexpected. She came home that night and handed him a glass of wine. I'm sorry, she said, eyes brimming with tears. I've been so distracted lately. I feel like we've been drifting apart. Can we fix this? Oliver stared at her, fighting the urge to shatter the glass. Because now, he knew what she was capable of, and he wasn't going to let her win. What would you do if you found out the person you trusted most was plotting against you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Oliver stared at Emma as she handed him the glass of wine, her apology sounding hollow in his ears. The tears in her eyes might have fooled him once, but not anymore. Not after everything he'd uncovered. He swirled the wine slowly, pretending to consider her words. Of course, he said, forcing a smile. We can fix this. Emma exhaled, her shoulders relaxing as if she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. But Oliver knew better. This wasn't reconciliation. It was manipulation. And if her tears didn't work, she'd already prepared a backup plan. The glass of wine. He didn't drink it. Instead, he set it down and made a mental note to have it tested. Because if Emma was willing to fake love, lie, and steal, who's to say she wouldn't go further? The next morning, Oliver met with Lauren to go over the latest developments. Tested the wine, she said, sliding a file across the table. It's laced with something strong enough to knock you out for hours, possibly longer. Oliver's jaw tightened. She's really trying to get rid of me. Lauren nodded. And soon, I checked her texts again. Brian's been pushing her to move forward, especially after the investigation into his finances started heating up. Oliver leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of it all sink in. They're running out of time, he said. Exactly, Lauren replied. And that makes them dangerous. Later that day, Oliver returned home earlier than expected. He parked down the street and watched from his car. Emma's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't alone. Brian's sleek black SUV was parked nearby. Oliver felt his pulse quicken as he got out and approached the house quietly, staying out of sight. Through the window, he saw them, Emma and Brian, sitting at the kitchen island, deep in conversation. He couldn't hear them, but their body language said it all. Emma looked nervous, pacing back and forth, while Brian tapped something into his laptop. Then Emma stopped, placed a hand on Brian's shoulder, and leaned in. Whatever they were planning, it was happening now. Oliver snapped a few photos, then sent them to Lauren. Their meeting looked serious. Lauren's reply came almost immediately. Stay put, I'll send backup. But Oliver wasn't in the mood to wait. He slipped inside through the back door, moving carefully. From the hallway he could hear Emma's voice. "I just want this done. I can't keep living like this." Looking over my shoulder, wondering if he knows. Brian's voice was lower, more confident. "He's already suspicious. That's why we can't delay. The climbing trip is perfect. He's been talking about clearing his head. We push him to go one loose harness, one fall, and we're free." Oliver's stomach turned. They were planning to kill him. And worse, they'd already rehearsed the details. He stepped into the room, his voice calm despite the rage burning inside him. "Planning my funeral already?" Emma and Brian froze. For a split second, panic flashed in their eyes, but Emma recovered quickly. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that," he shot back. "Conspiring to kill your husband in his own house. That's low, even for you." Brian stood, trying to play it cool. "I think you're overreacting." Oliver held up his phone. "Am I? Because I have pictures, messages, recordings, everything the cops need to lock both of you up for a long time." Emma's face crumbled. "But Brian..." He lunged. Oliver sidestepped just in time, sending Brian crashing into the counter. "Stop!" Emma screamed, but Oliver wasn't listening. Brian came at him again, this time swinging wildly. Oliver caught his arm and twisted, slamming him into the wall. "You think you can take everything from me?" Oliver growled. "My money, my life, think again." Brian tried to break free, but Oliver pinned him down until Lauren and her team arrived, guns drawn. "Get him out of here," Oliver said, stepping back as the officers cuffed Brian. Emma collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, but Oliver wasn't buying it. "You meant every word," he said, "and now you'll pay for it." Emma's arrest made headlines the next morning. Real estate mogul's wife arrested in murder plot. Oliver's phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls from reporters, lawyers, and friends who couldn't believe what they were hearing. But Oliver, he felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just emptiness. Because even though Emma was gone, the damage she'd caused lingered, and Oliver wasn't sure he'd ever recover. Weeks later, Oliver sat in his office, staring at the divorce papers on his desk. Emma had tried to call him from jail, begged for forgiveness, blamed Brian, even claimed she'd been manipulated, but Oliver didn't listen. He'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Instead, he focused on rebuilding. Lauren helped him secure his assets, change security protocols, and restructure his business. Brian was facing multiple charges, and Emma's trial was fast approaching, but the scars she left weren't so easy to fix. One evening, as Oliver locked up the office, he found himself staring out the window. Was this it? Was this what his life had become? A never-ending fight to protect what was his? Maybe. But one thing was certain. No one would ever take advantage of him again. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Oliver sat in the dimly lit conference room, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on him. The betrayal, the lies, and the near-death plot had stripped away any illusion of safety he once had. But now, as the pieces started to fall into place, he wasn't just surviving. He was preparing for the final strike. Lauren walked in, her expression serious. She set a file down on the table, flipping it open to reveal bank statements and phone logs. "It's worse than we thought," she said. Emma wasn't working alone, not entirely. Oliver frowned. "What do you mean?" Lauren pointed to a name highlighted in the documents, Nathan Blake. "He's Brian's partner ex-con, specializing in forgery and identity theft. He's the one who set up the shell companies and falsified Emma's documents. But that's not all." Lauren pushed another sheet toward Oliver. "He's been in contact with Emma even after her arrest." Oliver's jaw tightened. "How?" "Smuggled burner phones. She's been feeding him information. Locations of assets we haven't locked down yet. They're still trying to move the money before her trial." Oliver leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Unbelievable, she's sitting in jail, and she's still playing the game." Lauren nodded. "And Nathan, he's not just some sidekick. He's dangerous. 2 prior convictions for assault, 1 for arson. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty." Oliver's eyes darkened. "Then we hit him first." That night, Oliver followed Lauren's lead. Nathan's last known location was an upscale hotel downtown. Oliver watched from across the street as Nathan exited the building, looking every bit the smooth-talking con artist with his tailored suit and cocky swagger. Oliver's blood boiled. He wasn't going to let this man get away with ruining his life. Lauren's team was already in position. As Nathan stepped toward his car, 2 agents moved in, blocking him. "Mr. Blake?" Nathan turned, flashing a smug grin. "Do I know you?" "We need to talk." Nathan tried to bolt, but Oliver stepped out of the shadows. "Going somewhere?" Nathan froze. "You..." "Surprised?" Oliver asked, stepping closer. "You shouldn't be. I told Emma I'd find out everything. Guess you were part of the package." Nathan laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "This is all just a misunderstanding." "No, it's not," Oliver said. "You and Brian thought you could take everything from me, but the game's over." Nathan's smile dropped as the agents cuffed him. "You can't prove anything," he hissed. "Actually, we can," Lauren said, holding up a folder. "Phone records, bank statements, and enough evidence to put you away for decades." Nathan struggled, but it was over. Or so Oliver thought. 2 days later, Lauren called with an update. "You're not going to like this," she said. "Nathan's already lawyered up. He's claiming Emma manipulated him, that she set him up to take the fall." Oliver's stomach churned. "She's still pulling the strings. And it gets worse," Lauren added. "Nathan hinted that there's more. Hidden accounts, backup plans. Emma didn't just plan this once, she's been setting it up for years." Oliver's hands clenched into fists. "How do we stop her?" Lauren hesitated. "We need something solid, something that ties her to the plot in a way she can't deny. But to get it, we need leverage." Oliver exhaled slowly. "Then we go after Brian." The next evening, Oliver met Brian in the holding room. The man looked far less confident than before, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair unkempt. "Oliver," Brian started, but Oliver cut him off. "Don't even try it." Brian leaned back, forcing a smirk. "What do you want?" "The truth." Brian shrugged. "I already told the cops everything I know." Oliver slammed his hands on the table, making Brian jump. "You're lying, and if you think Emma's going to protect you, you're even dumber than I thought." Brian's confidence cracked. "She'll turn on you," Oliver pressed. "The second she thinks it'll save her, she'll sell you out. But if you give me what I need, if you help me bury her, I'll make sure the deal you get is better than the one she'll offer." Brian swallowed hard, weighing his options. Then finally he broke. "There's a safe," he said, "in Emma's storage unit. It has everything, documents, USB drives, even cash she stashed away just in case." Oliver leaned back, letting the relief wash over him. "Where is it?" Brian gave him the address. And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Oliver and Lauren moved quickly. They secured a warrant and raided the storage unit the next morning. Inside, they found everything Brian promised, and more. Fake IDs, forged signatures, contracts transferring ownership of Oliver's properties. And then, tucked inside a folder labeled Plan B, they found the most damning evidence yet: Emma's handwritten notes, detailing every step of the scheme. Oliver stared at the pages, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. She'd planned it all. Every lie, every betrayal, and now she was going to pay for it. Back at the courthouse, Oliver faced Emma one last time. She was escorted in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed. But even then, she managed to hold her head high, her eyes locked on his. "You can't win," she said as they passed in the hallway. But Oliver just smiled. "I already did." The trial was swift. With the new evidence, Emma's defense crumbled. Brian and Nathan both testified against her in exchange for reduced sentences. And Emma, she was found guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. As the judge read the verdict, Emma's mask finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as reality set in. But Oliver didn't flinch. He'd already mourned the woman he thought he loved. Now, he was ready to move on. What do you think about Emma's downfall? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking stories like this. Oliver sat in the courtroom, as the judge delivered the final verdict. The words felt heavy, echoing in his ears. Guilty on all counts. Emma's face crumbled, her flawless composure breaking for the first time. Tears streaked her cheeks as the reality of her fate set in. But Oliver. He didn't feel pity. Not anymore. This wasn't the woman he'd married, not the person he'd built a life with. That Emma was gone, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and dangerous. Someone who had planned to take his life. As the guards led her away, she looked back at him one last time. Her eyes were pleading, desperate. But Oliver didn't flinch. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without looking back. 2 weeks later, Oliver returned to the office, but things weren't the same. The emptiness of the house lingered in his mind, and the shadows of what had happened still followed him. Lauren noticed. "You can't let this define you," she said, placing a folder on his desk. "You survived it. Now you rebuild." Oliver gave a tight smile. "That's what I'm doing." But it wasn't just about rebuilding his company or his reputation. It was about making sure no one ever tried to take what was his again. He wasn't the same man he'd been before Emma's betrayal. That man had been trusting, maybe even naive. This Oliver was sharper, harder, and ready for whatever came next. And he didn't have to wait long. A week after Emma's sentencing, Lauren showed up at Oliver's house with news. "There's something you need to see," she said, her expression tense. Oliver followed her to the car where she handed him a tablet. The screen showed security footage, grainy but clear enough. It was Nathan. He'd been spotted leaving a storage unit 2 days earlier, the same one where Emma had hidden her evidence. "I thought he was in jail." "He made bail," Lauren said. "But that's not the problem. The problem is this." She swiped to another clip, this one showing Nathan meeting with a man Oliver didn't recognize. "He's already moving assets," Lauren explained. "Emma's plan wasn't just about you, it was bigger than that. She had contingencies, layers of backups, and Nathan's following through." Oliver's blood ran cold. "What are they planning now?" Lauren hesitated. "We don't know yet, but we do know one thing. They're not finished." The next night, Oliver's house was broken into. The security cameras caught everything, 3 masked men cutting the power and slipping inside. But what they didn't expect was Oliver waiting for them. He'd been ready. After Emma's betrayal, he'd fortified the property, motion sensors, alarms, and cameras hidden in places no one would think to check. And he wasn't alone. Lauren's team was stationed nearby, and when the men entered, they didn't stand a chance. One was tackled as soon as he reached the stairs, another was pinned in the kitchen, and the third tried to run, but was stopped at the back door. When the masks came off, Oliver wasn't surprised. Nathan's men. He stood over the last one, his voice cold. "Who sent you?" The man smirked. "You already know." And Oliver did. Emma might have been locked away, but her reach wasn't. Lauren worked through the night, piecing together the evidence from the break-in. "They weren't just looking for valuables," she said. "They were after documents, files connected to your business, Emma's files." Oliver paced the room, his anger barely contained. "She's still pulling the strings? How?" Lauren hesitated. "We think Nathan's been visiting her in prison, under the radar. He's acting as her go-between." Oliver's hands clenched into fists. "She's not going to stop, is she?" Lauren shook her head. "Not unless we make her." The next day, Oliver visited Emma in prison. She sat across from him, her once perfect appearance replaced by the dull uniform of an inmate, but her eyes still burned with defiance. "Did you miss me?" she asked, leaning forward with a smile. Oliver didn't answer. Instead, he placed a folder on the table. "What's this?" "Proof," he said. "Of everything you've done since you've been locked up, Nathan the break-in, the accounts you're still trying to access." Emma's smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Oliver leaned closer, lowering his voice. "It's over, Emma. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "And if it doesn't?" Oliver smirked. "Then I make sure you lose everything, not just your freedom, but the one thing you care about more than anything else." Emma's expression hardened. "And what's that?" He stood, towering over her. Control. Lauren's team moved fast, freezing Emma's hidden accounts and tracking Nathan's movements. Within days, Nathan was arrested again, this time for violating his bail conditions. But Oliver wasn't satisfied yet. He wanted to make sure Emma never had a way out. So he dug deeper, uncovering more connections, more names, people Emma had worked with before and during their marriage. And then he found it, a link to an offshore account in her maiden name. "Looks like she was planning to run," Lauren said, scrolling through the data. "Even after you were gone." Oliver stared at the numbers. "She never loved me," he said quietly. Lauren looked up. "No," she said, "but she underestimated you." With Emma's network dismantled and her allies taken down one by one, Oliver finally felt the weight lifting. He wasn't the man Emma had tried to destroy. He was stronger, smarter, and ready for whatever came next. But even as he rebuilt his life, he knew one thing for sure. He'd never let anyone get that close again. What do you think about Oliver's transformation? Was he right to show no mercy? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Oliver stood in the cold, sterile visiting room of the prison, staring across the table at Emma. She looked thinner, paler, her once polished appearance now reduced to the standard issue orange jumpsuit. But even behind bars, she still carried herself with the same air of confidence that once drew him in. He didn't feel pity. Not anymore. Emma leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You can stop pretending this is about closure," she said, her voice sharper than he expected. "We both know why you're really here." Oliver kept his tone calm. "I'm here to end this." Emma smirked. "And what? Exactly, I'm already locked up, or have you forgotten?" "You're not as locked up as you should be," Oliver replied, pulling out a folder and sliding it across the table. "I know about the offshore accounts, the backup plans, the people still working for you on the outside." Emma's expression didn't change, but he caught the flicker of worry in her eyes. "So what?" she said, leaning closer. "You think you can stop all of it? Shut down every account? Catch every one of my associates?" "I already have," Oliver shot back. "Nathan's in custody. Brian turned on you. The accounts are frozen. It's over, Emma." For the first time, Emma's composure cracked. Her nails dug into the table as she hissed, "You think you've won? You think this ends with me sitting in here rotting away?" Oliver's voice hardened. "I don't think, I know, because the second you decided to betray me, you sealed your fate." Emma's eyes flashed with desperation. "You don't understand. This wasn't just about you. It was bigger than that. Bigger than us." "There is no us," Oliver snapped. "There hasn't been for a long time." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but he didn't give her the chance. "I loved you," he said, his voice steady, despite the storm building inside him. "I trusted you, and you used that trust to try and destroy me. But now, you're the one who's ruined." He stood, towering over her. "This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about making sure you can never hurt anyone else again." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma alone in the cold, empty room. Outside the prison, Lauren was waiting. "How'd it go?" she asked. "She's done," Oliver said, "but she doesn't know it yet." Lauren handed him a tablet, showing the latest updates from the investigation. "We traced the last of her hidden accounts and shut them down," she said. "Nathan flipped completely, gave us names, dates, and even emails Emma sent from inside." Oliver scrolled through the files, his anger flaring as he read the messages. Emma hadn't just been scheming, she'd been mocking him. "He's so predictable. The idiot doesn't even know what's coming. Once it's done, we'll finally be free." Oliver clenched his jaw. "She's going to pay for every word," he muttered. Lauren's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "We have a problem," she said. "One of Emma's men, Richard Kane, just disappeared from surveillance. He was supposed to be under observation, but he slipped the tail." Oliver's heart sank. "Do you think he's coming after me?" Lauren didn't answer right away. "We can't be sure, but given Emma's history, we can't take any chances." That night, Oliver didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his office, staring at the security feeds from his house. Cameras covered every entrance, motion sensors tracked every movement, and guards patrolled the property. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. Emma had been one step ahead before. What if she still was? The attack came just before dawn. Oliver was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when the first alarm went off. Motion detected. His phone vibrated with the alert, and he pulled up the camera feed. Two figures, dressed in black, were moving toward the side entrance. Oliver didn't hesitate. He grabbed the gun he'd started keeping in the drawer and moved to the hallway, his heart pounding. The door burst open, and one of the men lunged inside. Oliver fired. The man dropped, groaning in pain as the second figure charged. This time, Oliver didn't miss. By the time the guards reached him, both men were down, and Oliver was left standing, his hands shaking. Lauren arrived minutes later, her team securing the house and taking statements. They were hired by Kane, she confirmed, holding up a phone recovered from one of the attackers. Text messages, calls. Emma set it up before she was arrested. Oliver exhaled slowly, the weight of it all pressing down on him. She won't stop, he said. Lauren's expression softened. She can't anymore, she replied. Not after this. But Oliver wasn't convinced. Emma might be behind bars, but her reach had already proven dangerous. And he wasn't going to let his guard down. Not now, not ever. The final blow came a week later. Lauren's team uncovered Emma's last plan, an offshore fund that was still active, hidden under an alias. It was enough to keep her influence alive. But Oliver moved fast, shutting it down and filing new charges against her. This time the evidence was airtight. Emma's trial was swift, and the additional charges ensured she'd spend the rest of her life in prison. But for Oliver, it wasn't just about winning the case. It was about reclaiming his life. The day Emma's sentencing was finalized, Oliver stood outside the courthouse, staring up at the sky. It felt different, lighter, clearer. He'd faced betrayal, danger, and loss. But in the end, he'd survived. And as he walked away, he knew one thing for sure. No one would ever take advantage of him again. What would you have done in Oliver's situation? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling recaps like this. Oliver paced his study, his footsteps echoing off the hardwood floor. The house felt too quiet, too still. He knew better than to mistake silence for safety. Emma might be locked away, but her shadow lingered, and with Richard Kane still on the loose, the threat wasn't over. Lauren's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "We found him." Oliver spun around. "Where?" She held up a tablet, displaying surveillance footage of Kane entering a rundown warehouse on the edge of the city. "He's holed up here," Lauren said. "We've confirmed he's armed and has at least 2 men with him. But there's more." Oliver leaned closer as she swiped to another image. A shipment of explosives and weapons. "He's preparing for something big," Lauren added. "We need to move now." The SWAT team surrounded the warehouse under the cover of darkness. Oliver watched from a nearby van, his pulse quickening as the tension built. Lauren sat beside him, headset in place, directing the operation. "We've got movement," she said, her voice sharp. Oliver stared at the screen as the feed flickered. Kane appeared, barking orders to his men. He looked agitated, pacing back and forth. "He knows we're coming," Oliver muttered. Lauren nodded. "But he doesn't know we're ready." The breach was fast and brutal. Flashbangs lit up the warehouse as officers stormed in, shouting commands. Gunfire erupted, and Oliver's stomach twisted as he watched the chaos unfold. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the radio crackled. "Suspect down, repeat. Richard Kane is down." Oliver exhaled, leaning back against the wall. But Lauren wasn't celebrating. "There's a problem," she said, replaying the footage. "Kane was already wounded when we went in." Oliver's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "He wasn't running this operation," Lauren said. "Someone else was calling the shots." The next morning, Oliver's worst fears were confirmed. Lauren handed him another report, her expression grim. "It's Emma." Oliver froze. "What?" "She's been orchestrating this from the inside," Lauren said. "Kane was just a pawn. The real orders were coming from her." Oliver's grip tightened on the file. "How she's in prison." Lauren hesitated. "Not for long. Her lawyer filed an appeal last week, and she might actually win." Oliver's blood ran cold. "No," he said firmly. "We're stopping this now." Later that night, Oliver met with Lauren and her team. "We need to catch her red-handed," he said. "If she walks free, this starts all over again." Lauren nodded. "We've already set up surveillance on her lawyer. If Emma tries to move money or issue new orders, we'll catch it." But Oliver wasn't satisfied. "That's not enough," he said. "We need to push her, make her desperate enough to slip up." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that?" Oliver's jaw tightened. "By making her think she's already won." The plan was risky, but Oliver had no choice. They leaked false reports that his accounts had been unfrozen and that he was liquidating assets. Lauren's team created dummy transactions to make it look like Oliver was moving money overseas, money Emma had been counting on. Within hours, Emma took the bait. Lauren's phone buzzed with an alert. "She's made contact," Lauren said. "Sent instructions to her lawyer for an emergency withdrawal." Oliver's eyes narrowed. "Let's finish this." The next morning, Oliver sat in the courtroom, watching Emma as she was escorted in. She looked confident, almost smug, like she thought she was one step ahead. Her lawyer approached the judge, arguing for her release based on procedural errors and insufficient evidence. But just as the judge was about to rule, Lauren walked in, carrying a stack of folders. "Your Honor," she said, handing them over. "We have new evidence." Emma's expression faltered as the judge flipped through the documents, emails, bank records, and phone transcripts tying Emma to Kane's operation. "Ms. Grant," the judge said, his voice sharp, "do you have any explanation for this?" Emma's lawyer stammered, but she didn't say a word. For the first time, she looked defeated, and Oliver knew he'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Mr. Grant, how do you feel about today's ruling?" Oliver paused, adjusting his cufflinks. "Justice was served," he said. Then he walked away without another word. Later that evening, Oliver sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. He should have felt relief, but all he felt was exhaustion. Lauren knocked on the door. "You did it," she said, sitting across from him. Oliver shook his head. "It's not over," he said. "People like Emma don't give up. They regroup, they come back." Lauren leaned back in her chair. "Then we'll be ready." And there it was, the end of a chapter, but not the end of the story. Because even as Oliver reclaimed his life, he knew the scars would never fully heal, but he'd learned his lesson, and no one would ever betray him again. What would you do if someone you trusted tried to destroy your life? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories like this one. Oliver sat in his office, staring at the glowing city skyline, but his mind wasn't on the view. The battle against Emma wasn't over. Not yet. Despite the evidence stacked against her, he couldn't shake the feeling that she still had one final move left to play. And he was right. Lauren's phone buzzed, breaking the tense silence. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "You're not going to like this," she said. Oliver braced himself. "What now?" She filed an appeal, and her lawyers pushing for a retrial, claiming the evidence we submitted was obtained illegally. Oliver slammed his fist on the desk. "Are you kidding me? After everything? She's still trying to weasel her way out?" Lauren nodded grimly. "And it gets worse. The judge approved a hearing. If her lawyer can poke enough holes in our case, they might overturn the conviction." Oliver felt his pulse quicken. "She's playing the long game," he muttered, "just like always." The day of the hearing came faster than Oliver expected. The courtroom buzzed with reporters and spectators, all eager for the next chapter in the scandal that had rocked the city. Emma entered in her orange jumpsuit, but something about her was different. She held her head higher, her lips curved in a slight smirk. It was the same confidence she'd worn when she first seduced him, when she convinced him she was the perfect wife. Oliver gritted his teeth. Not this time. The prosecutor presented the evidence again. Emails, phone records, and witness statements. But Emma's lawyer attacked every piece, arguing technicalities and procedural errors. By the time he finished, Oliver could feel the mood in the room shifting. Emma even managed to work up a few tears as she testified, painting herself as the victim, manipulated by Brian, betrayed by Nathan, and left to take the fall for crimes she claimed she never committed. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, but Oliver wasn't buying it. Neither was Lauren. "We need something stronger," she whispered during a break. "Something they can't spin." Oliver thought for a moment, then grabbed his phone. "Get me Brian," he said. Brian wasn't thrilled to hear from Oliver, but desperation had a way of changing priorities. With his plea deal hanging by a thread, he agreed to testify. When he walked into the courtroom, Emma's confidence cracked for the first time. "Tell them," Oliver said, staring straight at Emma as Brian took the stand. And Brian did. He spilled everything, from the initial plan to frame Oliver, to the offshore accounts and backup plans Emma had put in place. He even confessed to the break-in attempt and the hired hitmen, all orchestrated under Emma's orders. Emma's lawyer tried to discredit him, calling him a liar and a criminal, but Brian didn't flinch. "She used me," he said, his voice steady, "just like she uses everyone." Emma's face turned pale, her composure crumbling with each word. When the judge finally called for a recess, Oliver caught her eyes one last time. And for the first time, he saw something new: fear. The hearing ended with a devastating blow to Emma's case. The judge denied her appeal, citing overwhelming evidence and witness testimony. Emma's screams echoed through the courtroom as the guards led her away. Her polished facade finally shattered. Oliver exhaled, but it wasn't relief he felt. It was exhaustion. 2 weeks later, Oliver sat in his office, flipping through papers as Lauren walked in. "It's done," she said. "Emma's appeal is officially denied. She'll be in prison for at least 25 years. Oliver nodded, but there was no celebration in his eyes. "She's not coming back," Lauren added, as if trying to reassure him. "I know," Oliver replied. But deep down, a part of him still felt uneasy. Emma may have been defeated, but the damage she'd caused left scars, ones that wouldn't fade easily. That evening, Oliver stood on his balcony, looking out over the city he'd nearly lost. Everything he'd worked for, his company, his reputation, his life, had been at risk, and the person he trusted most had been the one to betray him. But he'd survived, and now he was stronger. As he raised his glass in a quiet toast to his future, he knew one thing for sure: he'd never let anyone get that close again. What do you think about Emma's downfall? Did Oliver make the right decisions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories like this. Oliver stood in the sunlit lobby of his company's headquarters, the weight of the last few months finally lifting. It had been a war, a long, brutal battle against betrayal, lies, and manipulation. But now, with Emma locked away and her appeal denied, he could finally breathe again. Lauren walked in, holding a file and flashing a rare smile. "You'll be happy to know Emma's offshore accounts have been fully seized," she said. "And Nathan's plea deal just fell through. He's looking at 15 years. Oliver exhaled. "That's good," he said, but there was no triumph in his voice, just relief. Lauren tilted her head. "You did it, Oliver. You won." He nodded, though the word didn't feel quite right. Winning that implied satisfaction, maybe even celebration, but all he felt was exhaustion and the nagging weight of everything he'd lost. Weeks passed, and Oliver poured himself into work. He expanded his company, restructured leadership, and built firewalls, literal and metaphorical, to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. But at night, when the office lights dimmed and the noise faded, he still felt the echo of Emma's betrayal, Lauren noticed. "You need to let it go," she told him one evening. "If you keep letting her win in your head, you'll never move forward." Oliver stared at her for a moment before finally asking, "How do you let something like this go?" Lauren's answer was simple: one step at a time. One of those steps came a month later, when Oliver visited his father's grave. He hadn't been there since the funeral, since Emma stood beside him, pretending to grieve while secretly planning his downfall. But this time was different. He knelt down, brushing away fallen leaves, and placed a single white rose on the stone. "You were right," he said softly. "About everything." His father had always warned him about trust, about how quickly it could be broken, and Oliver had ignored those warnings, letting himself believe in the illusion Emma had built, but not anymore. "I won't let it happen again," he promised, standing up and walking away. Meanwhile, Emma's life inside prison was far from the glamorous one she once led. Gone were the designer clothes, the extravagant dinners, and the adoring followers on social media. Now, she was just another inmate, stripped of power, influence, and control. Reports surfaced about how she struggled to adjust, filing multiple complaints about her living conditions, and trying, unsuccessfully, to gain special privileges. But the world had moved on without her. And for the first time, Emma Grant was truly alone. Oliver's transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. He started taking time for himself, traveling, reading, and rebuilding relationships with old friends he'd neglected during his marriage. And then, there was Lauren. What started as a professional partnership slowly turned into something more. She was grounded, sharp, and honest. The exact opposite of Emma. And Oliver found himself drawn to that. One evening, as they sat on his balcony overlooking the city, Lauren turned to him. "So what's next?" she asked. Oliver smiled. A real one this time. "Whatever I want," he said. Emma's story eventually faded from the headlines, replaced by new scandals and new controversies. But Oliver's story didn't end there. He used the experience as fuel, launching a foundation to help victims of fraud and betrayal. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. And as the foundation grew, so did Oliver's sense of purpose. He wasn't defined by what Emma had done to him. He was defined by how he'd fought back, and won. But perhaps the biggest change came in how Oliver viewed himself. The man who once measured success by wealth and power now valued something deeper: peace. And as he stood in his office, overlooking the city that had nearly chewed him up and spit him out, he finally felt it. Not fear, not anger, but freedom. So, what do you think? Did Oliver handle things the right way? Would you have forgiven Emma, or do you think she deserved everything she got? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more intense and thrilling stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.